we uncovered classified footage of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. It's startling that we have the CIA speaking on this tape. It says, don't show to the public. On the reel, it's dated 2 days into the flight, first flight to the moon, and all the astronauts are available on camera. This is unedited behind the scenes footage that they only showed about 30 seconds of. I have an hour.
In November, you went to an AI conference, right, where they showed the latest AI and they could basically see through imagery what was authentic and what was a deep fake.
The latest AI equipment was there that's not available to the public, but the VIPs who visited there got to play around with. And the computer has this deep fake protocol that has never been wrong. It'll tell you in 1 second whether it's real or a deep fake. So one team fed it pictures of the lunar surface from the unmanned Chinese probes. And it said these pictures are real. In comparison, it fed them pictures from the Apollo program from the 60s and early 70s. And the smartest AI in the world just said every single Apollo picture is fake. Fake foreground, fake background, or whatever. So go ahead and play it from here. That's good enough.
Apollo 11, Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over.
Was the moon landing real? Was the moon landing fake?
I'm going to step off the limb now.
That is probably one of the biggest conspiracy theories of all U.S. history ever. I'm bringing on Bart Sibrel. Apparently, Bart has access to NASA insiders, hidden, never before seen footage, and he has whistleblowers who confess things to him on their deathbeds about the moon landing not actually happening. With that said, let's see what we learned from this, and let's get into it.
I didn't expect to spend my part of my life talking about the moon landing fraud. I went from being the biggest fanboy, virtually worshiping the moon landings with kind of like a shrine in my house of Apollo 11 pictures that followed me wherever I went, from home to home. And then kept an open mind, very important. We can't learn if we're not willing to be wrong. And when I had become a filmmaker whose job is to make scenes look real that are fake, then I started looking at these pictures and it's like, these were definitely shot with electrical lighting. I mean, if your listeners go to Sibrel.com, that's S as in Sam, I-B as in boy, R-E-L, Sibrel.com, on the homepage is the moon landing fraud in 3 minutes, where I show a picture of shadows intersecting at 90 degrees from objects 5 feet apart that they claim is on the moon, when sunlight shadows are always parallel and it's impossible for them to intersect. So in quote moon photographs, they're intersecting at 90 degrees. So I guess the person who's at the front line in a battle knows most about the battle. And so I've been at the tip of the spear of the moon landing fraud for 20 years or more publicly, and then investigating it even longer before then, talking to the top people at NASA who knew that the moon landings were fake, talking to a millionaire.
You were talking to them?
Yeah. And
the people at NASA who knew it, they have told you it's fake.
That's correct. And they told me face-to-face in person. And then we also have an eyewitness who was at Cannon Air Force Base where they filmed it, June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. That's pretty specific. He was the chief of security of the Air Force's High Security Special Operations Intelligence Division. You know, the Army has their intelligence division, the Navy has it, and the Air Force has it. And my source at NASA said that the moon landings were faked by the United States Air Force. So years later, I found a person who worked at Cannon Air Force Base, their special ops headquarters, which is in Clovis, New Mexico. And this guy's name was Cyrus Eugene Akers. And as he was dying, he wants to get right with God. You know, if you believe in God and the Bible, God is very gracious. You know, he'll forgive murder. All you got to do is say, I'm sorry, and I won't do it again. You're forgiven. That's pretty good, huh? And so this guy believes that. So as he's dying, he tells his son, you know, I'm a murderer. I killed somebody. The son is shocked. Dear old dad killed somebody? He said, who? He said, well, a coworker at Cannon Air Force Base, which was right across the street, you know. This guy's chief of security at the most secure Air Force base where the fake moon landing was filmed. So the son, thought, what my father did is wrong. And what did they do with this victim? Did they just, bury him in the desert? What about his family? So he brings in the military police to give the victim's family closure. And he's there watching the military police investigate his father as his father's dying. And they ask him, who did you kill? And he said, this person. When did you kill him? June of 1968. And why did you kill him? He said, well, we both eyewitnessed them filming the fake moon landing. June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968. They spent 2 weeks bringing in fake lunar dust, truckload after truckload after truckload. They had 2 airplane hangars side by side. They removed the wall between them, made a huge lunar landscape, brought in the lunar module. And he said his coworker thought it was morally wrong, which of course it was. And he was going to tell a reporter. So he killed them to keep it a secret. That's why he committed murder. Funny thing to make up as you're dying, and sure enough, we have a person who put in their memoirs that they were at Cannon Air Force Base during those dates for a classified reason. And get this, Lauren, this chief of security stood beside President Johnson, who showed up the first of 3 days of filming. And according to the president's schedule, he was an hour flight away on vacation that day. And President Johnson gave Cyrus Eugene Akers, chief of security, a list of 15 VIPs who were allowed in to observe the moon landing fraud. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin are on that list. They weren't even in the spacesuits. They had their visors covered. You couldn't see their faces. They were there to observe. And a list of a bunch of people, 15 of them, which I have the list. They're published in the book at Sibrel.com, which I read myself in audio, Kindle or print. And this person, his name is Robert Emenager. I never heard of the guy. He put in his memoirs, he was at Cannon Air Force Base in June of 1968 for classified reason. He's on the list. And Robert Emenager, according to my research, was a science fiction consultant for the United States government. And he was there to make sure, the lunar set looked authentic or not. And as you know, you saw a funny thing happen on the way to the moon. And
I want to dive into those shadows.
We uncovered classified footage of them faking being halfway to the moon right in front of your eyes. They're using a 1-foot model of the Earth, as you saw. The film is on the homepage of Sibrel.com. And this is what convinced me. I thought, well, maybe they faked it. Who knows? But, with shadows intersecting at 90 degrees, it should be parallel, right? And the weird behavior of the astronauts and the Soviets being more advanced.
Let's look at the shadows.
Let's go to the most condemning one. Go to the right a little bit.
Because that's the
keep
thing.
Going to the right. You're almost there. You're right there. Hold there. Yeah, and then
this one.
Go. So that's the way. Go back to the way shadows should look. Okay. So it looks like you have the Spanish version of my movie, but in any case, this is the way shadows.
Subtitles.
Yeah, this is the way shadows should look.
Yeah, like
sunlight,
a straightforward kind of thing.
They should be parallel. Just go outside, look at 2 trees, 2 telephone poles, 2 people standing on a cloudless day. It's impossible. It's scientifically
because there's only
impossible.
One source of light. That's the reasoning.
And it's a million times bigger than the Earth. So it's going to cast shadows in the same direction over an entire continent or moon. You see, and there's no atmosphere on the moon. So the sunlight is 20 times brighter than it would be on Earth. So the last thing you're going to need is artificial lighting. Go ahead and hit play, and you'll see multiple examples, and I'll have you pause on the most condemning one, right? Here's shadows intersecting again.
Yes, this one's interesting because you're saying this astronaut, so right there is basically pointed to 12 o'clock, and then the other one on the left is
about 2 o'clock, but it gets worse than this if you continue to hit play. And you'll see And then there's a hot spot too. So what this means is, take it from a filmmaker, the light is really close. When you have an electrical light really close, it throws shadows in different directions because one
Right
person
there.
is to the left of the light, one person is to the right of the light. That now stop
So
here
like,
and pause here. Look at this. This is from allegedly the last mission to the moon, where the astronaut shadow is going at 12 o'clock and a rock about 5 feet away is going at 9 o'clock. I mean, come on. This light is really close. I mean, it's an
okay.
electrical light. And what that means is you could prove the moon landing fraud legally and scientifically in a court of law with this one picture. Take the jury out, show them intersecting shadows and sunlight, bring in a light, put it right here, show it that this is the way that they intersect. This light is really close, or either there's two electrical lights, one for the rock, one for the astronaut. It's
It,
impossible for shadows to intersect in sunlight, which means it's taken with electrical light, which means they're on Earth and not the moon, which means they faked the moon landing. That's what it means.
it is weird looking at this because I mean, logically, it doesn't look like there's one source of light. Why would something so simple though escape them? You know what I mean? Like if it's just like so simple of a detail that the CIA forgot that, right? Like,
No, here's that's an excellent question, by the way, that I'm rarely asked, if ever asked. Here's, according to my source at NASA, who told me that the moon landings were fake, who worked there for 6 years during the Apollo program. He said they intentionally made mistakes as kind of a form of whistleblowing. For example, Lauren, let's say I take you out to dinner and I say, this is the absolutely best restaurant in the city. And we're about to eat our steak, and a big cockroach crawls across your plate. Now, they may have great service and great atmosphere, and the steak might actually be pretty good, after you wash it off. But 10 years from now, 20 years from now, what are you going to remember? You're going to remember the cockroach, right? And so the opposite is true in a way. Once people accepted from Apollo 11 that they were on the moon, you can have intersecting shadows. You can have anything that you want. People have already believed it. It's burned, just like that cockroach is burned in your mind. It's burned in their mind. They already accepted that men were on the moon, at least 90% of the public at the time. There was 10% of the people who doubted it was real in 1969. Now it's at least 25%. And so they always quote a survey from like 25 years ago and say it's only 10%. No, they're afraid to quote the current survey. So here's all the proof we have. First, we have an
well, wait.
eyewitness.
So
Yeah, go
let me
ahead.
stop you there on that really quick, just so I understand. So the guy, your connection at NASA, said that they might have even intentionally done that.
Correct. Well,
Okay.
you saw the film. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. On the homepage of Sibrel.com, you're showing a Spanish version of the film. It's also in French and Russian. And you saw them faking being halfway to the moon. We have a reel that when you pop it in, it says don't show to the public. And on the reel, it's dated 2 days into the flight, first flight to the moon, and all the astronauts are available on camera. This is unedited behind the scenes footage that they only showed about 30 seconds of. I have an hour of them working on a special effects shot with a 1-foot model of the Earth with allegedly black space around it to allegedly claim the cameras at the window shooting the Earth far away. The lights come up and it's a 1-foot model of the Earth, dated 2 days into the flight. They're faking being halfway to the moon. My source at NASA says someone sent that to me intentionally. And
So,
there are
so
other
would
people.
they intentionally fake that for the public to question if it was real or not, just so that it was more realistic?
Well,
Like, like, oh, maybe there was, because they do that in Coca-Cola. Like, for example, that's not unheard of in the food industry, in the Coca-Cola companies. There's this guy who used to consult with Coca-Cola and then ended up being a part of this like project where it was designed to stay on the food stamps. They were considering taking it off because it's unhealthy. And anyways, Coca-Cola ended up staying on the food stamps because they came up with a campaign that said it would be racist if they were not included on the food stamps. And one of the reasons they got away with it, that this guy, the whistleblower, explained, was that Coca-Cola intentionally created studies that were for Coca-Cola and studies that were against Coca-Cola. And that was an intentional effort by them to make it so that, it's not so one-sided that it's like unplausible.
Well, yeah,
so is that what you're saying?
Well, that's interesting and a complicated way of looking at it. But the point that I get from that inside of you is that if they're willing to falsify data, right? Falsify data to sell Coca-Cola, imagine how much willing they would be to falsify data when billions of dollars are involved and the prestige of the United States of America is involved. Because Kennedy said, the martyr of the country, will go to the moon before the end of the 1960s. That proved to be impossible. It's impossible today. Okay, so we have that footage at Sibrel.com of them faking being halfway to the moon. That would prove it in a court of law. We have shadows intersecting at 90 degrees. That would prove
Yeah.
it. And we have an eyewitness that would prove it. And if you want to show and then we have the logic that today, with 55 years better technology, the farthest that NASA can send an astronaut into outer space is only 1,000th the distance to the moon. So how could they go to the moon? How could they go to the moon when all of NASA had 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone on the first attempt ahead of schedule, when with 5 decades better technology, they can only send an astronaut 1,000th the distance to the moon today? It's the first time in the history of the world that technology was greater in the past than in the future, which is impossible, which means they faked it. You see that?
Well, let's talk about this shape too, and I want to get to what you're saying about the technology side, because I think that's really interesting as well. I'm friends with a lot of people in the space industry, and they are adamant that now we have a bigger budget, and that the budget was taken away, which is why the pause, let's say, happened. We'll get to that, but before we do, I think it's important that we touch on this, because I thought this was really interesting. So like the claim here, and this is what you were saying, you have footage on, right? The kind of like the back end footage or whatever you call it from them setting the scene. And
Right.
I think we saw a little bit in the film.
If you want to demonstrate this footage, maybe we should bring up the non-Spanish version so we can see the English of what they're saying. But go back to the beginning of the tape. You can pause it here. Okay, pause it here. This is good enough to show. This is the outtakes. They never showed this segment to the public because it didn't look good.
This was never showed. Okay.
This was never shown.
Gotcha.
This is part of they only aired about 20 seconds of it. This is the raw footage. Okay. So according to NASA, okay, this is the Earth floating in space. Okay. 2 days into the flight, where this is timestamped by a computer, and I'm sure NASA knows how to tell the time. This this absolutely was taking place 2 days after they launched. It's timestamped that way by NASA. Okay. So they're faking going to the moon. They have to demonstrate that they're at 2 days into the flight, halfway to the moon. So according to Neil Armstrong, there's only one window that faces the Earth, and it's filled up with the TV camera, meaning the lens of the camera has to be against the window of the spacecraft to shoot this Earth floating in space. So allegedly, this is the Earth floating in space with the black of space around it. In fact, this is a circular window of the spacecraft, outside of which it's completely filled with the Earth in low Earth orbit. You see that? There are no cloud bands. You see how the cloud band goes completely top to bottom, left to right, depending on your perspective of north, south, east, or west? That's impossible. Clouds don't form that long. And so this is actually the circular window of the spacecraft. The camera's actually at the back of the spacecraft, and they're pretending that this is the Earth floating in space. The lights come up, you see it's the window, and you realize that they're faking being halfway to the moon by creating this mock version of the Earth floating in space.
Well, it's not even like, and then this on the top, the text there in the film, it says, we shut out the sun. The person in the film says, we shut out the sun coming in so many other windows into the spacecraft, basically.
Yeah, these are private conversations that were never broadcast. But what it shows
Yeah.
is
Oh,
that
that's interesting.
they're rigging this to look like the Earth floating in space. But this
So,
is
like, to
this is just a
set this,
circular window with the Earth
yeah.
outside of it. But
So, like, to set the
as you'll see
scene,
coming up, according to Neil Armstrong, he says right here, you could play the audio if you want. He says this is Neil Armstrong calling in from 130,000.
so it's weird though, because why would it be such a wonky shape, even if it was a window? Like, wouldn't it be the right shape if it
Well,
was a circle?
the problem is you're seeing it's part of the thickness of the window. It's a airtight window, so it's like 2 inches thick, and it doesn't even form a complete circle because you're looking at it at a downward angle into the window. They didn't use this part. These are part of the outtakes that they never used.
So
Uh,
this is all. How did you get your hands on this again?
Well, according to my source at NASA, whistleblowers sent it to me. Now, here's where they insert a crescent piece of material into the window to make it look like the Terminator line between night and day. This is the part that they showed. We have them rigging the shot, talking about how they're rigging it, and allegedly, this is the Earth floating in space. But in fact, it's a circular window with part of the Earth outside of the window from Earth orbit. And that little part on the right hand side is a crescent piece of material they've inset into the window so that it looks like the Terminator line between night and
Yeah,
day.
this thing.
Correct.
Yeah.
You can show the outtake where the lights come up and you see them fiddling with the. Now, this is where he claims to be 130,000 miles out. If you want to play the audio,
Yeah.
you have to go. Okay, so Neil Armstrong. Okay, so pause it there. So this is the part they showed in all the documentaries. This is allegedly them looking back at the Earth with the lens. The lens would have to be at the glass of the window, right, to shoot the Earth far away. This is the
Like, so
part that
setting,
they
just to
aired.
be clear, because this part took a second for my brain to wrap around. So you're saying, in theory, that right now, as it would have to be, you're like this, the lens is like this on the window.
Well, the
And
lens
that's
would
how,
have to be touching the glass. They said that in the part that
yeah.
they were intending to air to explain to the audience how they're getting the shot. They said they only
Yeah,
have
so it's
one
that
window.
close, and it's,
They said word for word, they only have one window that faces the Earth and it's filled up with the TV camera, meaning they can't even
okay,
see
so it's
the
super
image.
far away, allegedly.
Right. If this is the Earth floating in space, then the camera lens has to be right up against the glass. But it's not
Okay.
up against the glass. They're lying, obviously,
So then
because
here
they're
you're
fake.
saying, because
The camera's actually right now at the back of the spacecraft. The black that you're seeing are the darkened walls of the spacecraft, and you'll see it for yourself in a second because the lights come up and you see that it's a 1 foot model of the Earth. They're faking being halfway to the moon. Now, if they really went to the moon, why would they be faking any of it? And if they're
So are
faking,
you saying this is a
play
little
this part.
model?
This is when an astronaut's arm gets in front of the window. They never showed this. We have the outtakes. So you'll see
So
Michael Collins' arm. You'll see the hair on his arm getting in front of the
yeah.
window, proving it's a 1 foot model of the Earth. Watch this. Okay. So there's Michael Collins's arm getting in front of the window. You see, that's a 1 foot model
How does
of
somebody
the
make
Earth.
that mistake?
You see that? Well, these are the
Yeah.
outtakes. They edited this. We have the unedited
Right.
version that says "Do not show to the public" at the beginning of it. You see that?
It says do not show to the public.
Yes, there's a slate.
Well,
We'll show that in a minute. I'll have you rewind it. It says
I
"Do
don't know
not
if I
show to the
remember that
public."
part.
Okay. Now
Okay.
this is the part that
So
proves.
just to be clear,
Well, wait a minute.
on this,
Pause it here. Okay, if you're going to ask a question, go ahead.
I was going to ask. So this is before we were filling the window with like a bunch of the Earth to make it look rounder than it is. This, you're saying, is a camera's way far back, and this is a fake model
Correct.
of the Earth.
You'll see it when you hit play. Okay. So
Yeah, I
a
remember that.
moment ago, hit pause first. A moment ago, they said that this was the Earth floating in space. They said this is 130,000 miles out. We have the unedited version. What you're seeing is the unedited, classified version, never broadcast, debuted in my film on the homepage of Sibrel.com. Hit play, and you'll see for yourself that they're faking being halfway to the moon. Okay. They have the iris almost all the way closed. Here's a work light in the top left so that they could see camera controls but not throw light onto the walls. It's diffused. There's
Is that what
diffusion
that
over
looks
there.
like?
Yeah. Now
Is
you're
that what
going
it
to
looks like
see,
from the
keep an eye on
screen?
the earth there. You're going to see them remove part of the crescent insert in front of the window. See that? And then the lights come up. Yeah, that's their arm in front of the window. Then you'll see the lights come up and you'll see that the camera is actually at the back of the spacecraft and they're using the window to make a 1-foot model of the Earth because it's completely filled with bright Earth shine in low Earth orbit. We just got them right there, and it's dated 2 days into the flight. That's proof that Apollo 11 is faking being halfway to the moon from Earth orbit. Even my critics agree that is them faking being halfway to the moon. 2 NBC News directors agree that this is proof, 100% proof, that they are faking being halfway to the moon. If you go back to that clip, Lauren, at the very beginning of it, you'll hear the CIA on a third track of audio. The fact is, they never left Earth orbit. Here we are 55 years later, and they still can't leave Earth orbit. One of the clips at Sibrel.com is a space shuttle astronaut saying, right now, as far as we can go is Earth orbit, and we hope to go to the moon eventually, right? And so they're really in Earth orbit. They never left Earth orbit. So they're close radio transmission time to NASA. So if they said hello, they would say, hello, how are you? I'm doing fine. How's your day? Not too bad. How's yours? But that would give away the fact that they're close to the Earth because they're supposed to be halfway to the moon. So they calculated a 2-second radio delay going to the astronauts because of they're supposed to be 100,000 miles away and a 2-second delay coming back. So if you play the beginning of the clip, you're going to hear NASA say the TV picture looks great. And someone is counting off 4 seconds of dead air to fake a 4-second radio delay, to fake being further away from the Earth than they really are. At the end of the 4 seconds, you'll hear a CIA agent say, talk. And then Neil Armstrong starts speaking after 4 seconds were counted off to fake a 4-second radio delay. If you want to cue it up and play it, it's startling. It's startling that we have the CIA speaking on this tape. So go ahead and play it from here. That's good enough.
What is Armstrong trying to tell
Hello,
us?
Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger, we're nothing in on Earth. Okay,
so according to NASA,
again,
yeah, you can play it again. I mean, it's incredible. According to NASA, there's only 2 people on this conversation, NASA and the astronauts, but that's a lie. There's a third track of audio of the CIA counting off 4 seconds and telling Neil Armstrong, don't answer NASA until 4 seconds go by. Otherwise, they'll know you're still in Earth orbit. 1, 2, 3, 4, talk. Play it again. Let people hear it. I mean, it's remarkable. We have them faking a 4-second radio delay.
They are attempting to create.
How do you know it's not NASA? How do you know it's not NASA?
Okay, so whoever's saying talk, it's not the astronauts and it's not NASA. In fact, there's no radio EQ. It's someone right on top of the microphone where this tape is being recorded. And so
how do you know
this
it's not NASA?
Well, because listen to it, you can tell. Why?
Well, I mean, you could, but what if it's just a different
listen
voice?
to the voice and listen to the EQ, the walkie-talkie sound of NASA, the walkie-talkie sound of the astronauts, but the crystal clear sound of talk. Listen to it again.
Hello, Apollo 11. Houston, Goldstone says that the TV looks great. Over. Okay, Roger, we're nothing in on Earth.
You see that? There's no walkie-talkie radio sound on talk. There's the walkie-talkie radio sound on NASA. There's the walkie-talkie radio sound of the astronauts. But this is where the CIA is recording the secret tape. right? That's why it says don't show to the public at the beginning. That's why the talk voice is not the voice. It's a different person than NASA, and it's crystal clear. It's not being transmitted. It's going from that room to the tape where that person is. So they're
Okay,
faking
with
a 4-second radio delay to give the impression they're halfway to the moon when they're really not. And we have the lights coming up and proving that that's not the Earth floating in space from 130,000 miles out. It's a window. It's a 1-foot model of the Earth. That's what convinced me. I gave them the benefit of the doubt as long as possible. But even my critics agree that that is them faking being halfway to the moon, which they would never have to do if they could leave Earth orbit. And what a surprise, 55 years later, they still can't leave Earth orbit. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon. Okay, so you can drive cars and play golf on the moon with 1960s technology, but 55 years later, you can only have mannequins orbit the moon. So my book is interactive, and one of the clips is NASA's own engineer saying the technology necessary to go through the radiation that surrounds the Earth in the upper atmosphere and going to the moon, that technology has not been invented yet. Every manned mission, the space station, the space shuttle, is all below the radiation, except going to the moon. You'd have to go through it.
the
And
Van
he
Allen
says,
radiation belt,
that's right. You can play that clip of Kelly Smith saying that the technology necessary to go through the radiation has not been invented yet. He says we must solve these challenges, radiation, before we send people through this region of space, meaning they're not solved. That's why there's mannequins going through the radiation belt to orbit the moon. You see that? Because they would be killed. That's why they can't go to the moon, among many other reasons.
I think it's important to show what the radiation belt is. It's essentially these two shields around the Earth of radiation.
Yeah, and there's a previous graphic that shows that every manned mission, Gemini, Mercury, Skylab, the Space Shuttle, Soyuz, everything has been about 750 miles below the radiation, except going to the moon. You have to go through it. So one of the clips we have, my book is interactive. I write a chapter and then I say, go to Sibrel.com, watch clip 1, clip 2. One of the clips is Kelly Smith, an engineer at NASA in his 20s, saying, look, the technology to go through this radiation has not been invented yet. He says we must solve these radiation challenges before we send people through this region of space. Well, he's saying they haven't been solved yet. They have to do that first before they can send people through that region of space, and they haven't solved those challenges. Don't you realize?
One thing that I thought was interesting too when I was watching this was the way that they were talking about the stars.
Now look at that guy's expression, by the way.
Yeah, that was the thing that I thought was weird. So to preface it, basically, they were asked what the stars looked like, and they said, "Well, we actually didn't even really see the stars."
Now,
let's see if we can play this.
Hit play and then pause here.
Lies that perhaps the reason Neil Armstrong was never given an on-camera.
Okay. Actually, pause there. Okay, pause. Hit pause. So there we go. Okay, so you were trying to zoom in. Sorry, this is so profound to me. I'm hard to convince of something like this. The window shot of them faking being halfway to the moon convinced me. I cried when I saw it. I'm like, oh my gosh.
Did you cry?
I cried. I just wept quietly. I'm like, oh my gosh, they really did fake the moon landing. My heart was crushed, not for being a space enthusiast, for mankind. Mankind's greatest accomplishment is a fraud by the most powerful nation on earth. And because it's a positive lie, you can change the hat on who killed Kennedy and why. He's still dead. Or 9/11. Who did it and why? They're still dead. But it's a tragedy. This is a positive lie. It is a god of scientists. Go back to his expression. Let's talk about that for one more second. Go back to Neil Armstrong. Go back to Neil Armstrong's expression.
You and I both know what this is. What we're looking at here is they were asked in a conference basically about a lot of things, but what the stars were like, what they looked like, if we could see them. And basically they said, oh no, we really couldn't see them. In fact, one of them was like, oh, I don't really even recall what, if they were even there, which was odd, even of just because you're in space. That's one of the most profound things that you're going to notice, especially on the moon that doesn't have any city lights to block stars, right? There's not that much.
There's a NASA photograph of the space shuttle launch at sunrise, and you see part of the sun, and you still see stars in the background, even through the atmosphere of Earth. On the moon, there would be no atmosphere. Go back to Neil Armstrong's expression again while I'm describing this. And you're right. They were asked if you saw any stars, and he said, he says, I don't recall. And it's like, you don't recall the vividness of the stars from the surface of the moon? Pause there for a second, okay? This is the guy's expression at the press conference when he allegedly walked on the moon, okay? Many people are convinced of the fraud because of this. They look like they're at the funeral of their mother instead of the winning locker room of the Super Bowl, right? I mean, if they did this amazing, this is his expression during the press conference.
It is weird because you would think that your emotions would overflow with like, whoa, it was incredible. Like you would have a different expression with something if it was profoundly beautiful or positive or impactful, which none of these guys came back saying a negative experience, right? Like they weren't, because they all retired after this, right?
Yeah, they immediately retired. They didn't have anything to do with it ever again. And as you know
so was there any kind of like my devil's advocate is like, was there something bad that happened on this flight that was like that was traumatic to them?
The bad traumatic thing was they didn't go. They threatened to kill their wife and children if they didn't participate in the fraud. My book goes into the assassination of the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon. I was asked by the widow of this murdered astronaut not to put it in the movie, but I had permission to put it in my book after she died. I interviewed her for 4 hours. The woman who was married to the man who was going to be the first man to walk on the moon before Neil Armstrong. She told me he said they were 10 years away or more from going to the moon, not 2 at the time, that he was preparing reports for Congress that he was given to his senator that's saying, look, they're no way going to make this schedule of Kennedys. She said that pissed off his supervisors, that he was complaining that the equipment was a piece of junk. They couldn't even get a wired intercom to work between 2 buildings. Okay, they couldn't hear each other. A wired intercom, and he even said, "How are we going to go to the moon if we can't talk between 2 buildings?" He was so frustrated that they weren't fixing anything because they knew they were going to fake it and hadn't informed the astronauts yet. That days before he died, was murdered, he went up to the top of the rocket without permission with a bunch of reporters, and he affixed a lemon the size of a grapefruit and said the thing is a piece of junk on the national news. His widow told me that on January 26, 1967, he came home from work and said, "Hun, for some strange reason, the CIA, who we heard on the tape, is all over the launch pad today inspecting the equipment. I've never seen them here in 3 years. Why did the CIA show up today to inspect the equipment?" The next day, he's dead from faulty equipment. His widow's opinion and his son's opinion, who I interviewed for 3 hours, who's a 747 pilot, says they're 100% certain that he was murdered by the CIA because he was a whistleblower of the Apollo program. And so not only did they fake the moon landings, they murdered people to cover it up. Cyrus Eugene Akers, chief of security at Cannon Air Force Base, confessed to murdering somebody. The widow of 3 people, they said they were murdered by the CIA, the crew that was going to be, but they wouldn't cooperate, so they killed them and made it look like an accident. This is the people who are running our government. And because it's a positive lie, oh, the glorious moon landing, the great, how dare you say that the moon landings are fake? It's the God of science. People have literally made a God of it. And as we talked before we started recording, the opening of my film at Sibrel.com opens up with the Tower of Babel. The goal to make the tallest building was never finished because they were going to boast about it. And then we showed the Titanic they were so proud of. They put in print the ship that God himself could not sink. You see that? And then Richard Nixon, when he knew they were not on the moon, called the moon landing the greatest event in the universe, second to God making it, when he knew they weren't there. This is a spiritual war between truth and lies by the most powerful nation on earth that sends billions of dollars to foreign wars and yet will not take care of their own hurricane victims. Now, Bobby Kennedy Jr. has more access to the JFK files than Oliver Stone does. And he said his expert opinion that he is 100% certain of is that the CIA murdered President Kennedy. And then Robert McNamara, who was defense secretary during the Vietnam War, said the public's against it. We need to create a Pearl Harbor event because before Pearl Harbor, 90% of Americans were against entering World War II. After Pearl Harbor, 90% were for it. So Robert McNamara said they created a fake attack of a North Vietnamese ship on an American ship. He said it never happened in the Gulf of Tonkin. We made it up. Congress passed a law based on that called the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution that started the war, that killed 1 million people, including 58,220 of their own soldiers without reason. So if the CIA, the corrupt federal government, is willing to kill their own president, willing to kill 58,220 of their own people, I don't think they're going to have a problem faking a video image of the moon. It's only that it's this pride in their accomplishments. Look, today, NASA can only send astronauts 1,000th the distance to the moon. You can't have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology in 1969 than today. That proves it. The shadows intersecting proving it. The 1 foot model of the Earth proves it. And an eyewitness who was there when they filmed it at Cannon Air Force Base proves it. What more proof do you need if you really have an open mind?
Sure. So with that too, I wonder, have you spoken with RFK before?
Spoken with who?
RFK, Robert Kennedy Jr.
I haven't, but I've talked to people who have talked to him.
Okay. He'd be interesting for you to talk to. He's got his own podcast, but yeah, I bet he would be interesting for you guys to have a conversation about this. It is fascinating because we do, everybody who talks about this gets labeled as a conspiracy theorist. Everybody who has any kind of an open mind about this gets labeled as that person who's wacky or doesn't, whatever, like all these things. But, it's funny because time and time again, I feel like we keep seeing that not all conspiracies, but a lot of the quote conspiracies, they turn out to be like true. I mean, the Pearl Harbor situation's pretty much been proven that happened, that it was faked basically, or it was initiated really, let's say, by the US to make this war happen. I'd be curious to see, this is just a question a spinoff, but what are your thoughts on 9/11? Did you have any thoughts on that, or is that a whole different can of worms?
Well, yeah, that's a good question. I'm a journalist, so I research the experts, right? If a former vice president of a certain pharmaceutical company making a certain medicine for an illness that people don't even have about this event for the last 3 years say the whole reason to take it was manufactured and it's not good for you, and they might be using it to lower the number of people on the earth, and he worked at the company as a vice president for 10 years, that opinion becomes my opinion. He's the expert, not me. If Robert Kennedy Jr. says his uncle was killed by the CIA, I'm sure he's done his research. That becomes my opinion. 3,000 architects and engineers are risking their livelihoods, their reputations, by affirming with absolute certainty, not 1, not 3, not 500, 3,000 have signed. It's impossible for an airplane pinhole to go in and out of a skyscraper grid and to cause its collapse. All you have to do is look at the Oklahoma City bombing photograph. Half the building was blown away and it stood rock solid because it's a grid. So if half the building blown away won't cause its collapse, a pinhole going in and out will not. And then half the U.S. population doesn't even know about the third building, the 47-story tall building that collapsed allegedly because of a debris furniture fire. I mean, come on. So yeah, somebody, if the federal government They have like 1,200 pages to prove that Oswald killed Kennedy. I mean, come on. They have this animation that proves that a furniture fire can cause a skyscraper to collapse. It's just ridiculous. These people are at large. Lauren, we don't say, well, in my neighborhood, one child disappears every week. It's been going on for 50 years. It's just one of those things. No. We need to stop this. The interesting thing about the moon landing fraud, it probably killed fewer people, certainly than 9/11. The JFK witness list, they say they knocked off 200 people to pull that off. This may have killed 20 people or less, but it's the one thing that would enrage the public enough that they were deceived about something that they waved their flag and prayed for. They gave them ticker tape parades. They printed it on coins that they were on the moon. They printed it on stamps,
Right.
and they gave them medals of honor for being such good liars. This is the key for the deep state to come down, is exposing the moon landing fraud.
Couldn't you argue, and I'm not disagreeing with you, but couldn't you argue that maybe this ended a war? Maybe this was something that gave national pride for some, really meaningful moment. And again, you can't lie and just expect that, okay, you can lie here and sometimes here and not there and all that. There's got to be a line that with that said though, it's like, I try to wonder and think, the people who are doing this just can't all be nefarious pieces of shit, right? They're maybe they are, maybe they're psychopaths, maybe they are, and I can't think like a psychopath, so therefore I can't relate. That is a reality, but also maybe there is a deeper thing that it's kind of like when you run a company, the CEO, and you even said this on your podcast with Joe, the CEO knows a lot more than all of the bank tellers at Wells Fargo. That's just how it works, because that's just the amount of information each segment, each section is allowed to have. Now, again, I'm not here justifying people lying, especially on such large scale, but maybe there's not such a nefarious reason for everything. Has that ever crossed your mind, that maybe it's for greater good in a way?
Well, the problem is they murdered people to keep it a secret.
That's true.
If they faked the moon landing and nobody died, maybe the devious part of me would respect their ingenuity, like the people who tunnel from the dry cleaner, and into the bank and get the gold. Good for them, but not if they slit the throat of 3 guards who are just married with children. You see, that's what they did.
Sure.
When President,
sure, but I mean, even that guy though, I'm almost like, well, what an idiot. No, I shouldn't say that because he's killed, but why would he bring on the media to the rocket without clearing it first with communications?
Because he was pissed off. Because he was
but that's what I'm saying. That's that's like crossing a boundary of a company that has whoa. There's fireworks going on.
Oh my gosh, is it the 4th of July already? I need to get my calendar adjusted.
Wow, that was wild. This is talking. Let's do it again.
The point is, that was like his. He had already done 9 attempts to achieve justice the right way. He followed proper procedures 9 times in a row. And
so you're saying
after 9 dead ends, on the 10th time, he used the media to help. What they were doing is perpetrating embezzlement. They took an equivalent of $250 billion of taxpayers' money to fake the moon landing, and then to pay the salaries of the CIA agents who killed the astronauts who were trying to expose it. That's our government. Do you understand?
So he was trying to show that the taxpayers were essentially paying for a fraudulent mission.
Well, he didn't know at that point they were going to fake it. What he knew is that it was impossible to go to the moon by December 31st, 1969. That he knew. And he couldn't understand.
What did he?
Because nothing would work. I mean, you can't get an intercom to work between 2 buildings. There's a clip, and a funny thing happened on the way to the moon that I don't bring the narrator's attention to, but they're doing like a rehearsal on the ground in front of reporters, like 3 weeks before they allegedly go to the moon. They have like a stick with a bag on the end of it to pick up a lunar sample, and they're demonstrating how they're going to pick up the first moon rock, and the bag falls off the stick. They can't get a stick and a bag to work. They can't get an intercom between 2 buildings to work. You see what I'm saying?
Is he trying to bring this to the public's?
I'm sorry.
So is he trying to bring that 9 times? He tried to bring that
to NASA's attention. He complained through the proper channels, and then he went to a senator and congressman and got no help. That's why he held the press conference. You see, he said something wrong here. So he did the press conference. Does anybody care? And because he was a whistleblower, they killed him a few days later. Right.
The thing that I wonder about this, and this isn't to argue the point or defend a murder or anything like that. The thing that I only think about is like, what if this is all true and that it's not true? Okay, like maybe that's the reality of it, and maybe there's a good reason for it, right? Like I wonder because it's
a good reason to murder innocent people. No, there's not a good reason.
No, but it's also like war is unfortunate and war sucks and it's necessary.
You're forgetting the most repeated proverb in the universe. The truth will make you free. The truth will make you free. If you want to have peace with other countries that have nuclear weapons, you maybe invite them and show where all your nuclear weapons are, and you go and look and see where all their nuclear weapons are, and you have them over to your house for dinner, and you go to their house for dinner. The more truth you have, the less likely you're going to have a war, you see. And if the truth makes you free, then lies enslave you. You see that? We can find out who shot JFK. We can find out who did 9/11. But if we don't tell the truth about the moon landing fraud, we're still slaves. And if people want to bring down the corrupt federal government, the best way to do it, the key, the linchpin, the finger out of the dike is the moon landing fraud. That, according to the NBC News director. NBC News originally saw the footage that we just saw. They 100% agreed that it proved the moon landings were fake, and they refused to broadcast it for fear it would cause a civil war. You see that? Because I don't think it caused a civil war, but it would cause a restructuring of the federal government. When Clinton was asked, why did you have your affair? After he denied it 19 times, he said, because I could get away with it. That's why they faked the moon landing. It wasn't about the Cold War. It wasn't, for any good reason. It was because they could. Why did they kill Kennedy? You think they had a patriotic reason for killing Kennedy? Making a father of children, making the children orphans? You think they had a reason for that? Why they faked the beginning of the Vietnam War, which we lost. So that was a mistake. You see this? There is no excuse for lying and murdering their own people. They're gangsters. That's who runs this country. The moon landing fraud is the key to getting rid of the gangsters because it will outrage the public so much that they will demand change. It's key. And yet it's the one thing alleged anti-deep state podcasters are defending. I know America has gotten bad, but at least we went to the moon. You know what I mean? And what does it tell you, Lauren, when the poster child of conspiracy theories has to be the moon landing fraud? Wouldn't you agree? The poster child is the moon landing fraud. That's the typical, conspiracy theory. And when you realize that's true, what does it tell you about the other ones? If half of all conspiracy theories are true, we're in trouble. If only the moon landing conspiracy theory is true, we're in trouble because they lied, they embezzled money, they murdered people to cover it up, and they're still in charge. The same people are their apprentices or offspring. These are the people who run the country. It's getting worse, not better.
I think your point about the truth is the lesson to take from this. I think it's fascinating that you tie the movie into that and bring it back to that central point. And like the truth does set you free, right? Even your point right there about, well, that's not how you go about making friends, is lying to them. You invite them in, you show each other what each other has, and then you negotiate and you go from there. I think that's well said. So, okay, with all of that, I know people can find your stuff at www.sibrel.com. Highly recommend watching this movie. This was such a good movie. A funny thing happened on the way to the moon. I'm going to watch again. It's only 47 minutes long, but that means I think it's good that you made it that length because now it's consumable, right? Like 47 minutes is nothing. Right now, movies are like 3 hours. So, where do people find that on YouTube? Is it your website?
No, you just go to my website, which is S as in Sam, I, B as in boy, REL, Sibrel.com. The funny thing happened on the way to the moon is on the homepage. The moon landing fraud in 3 minutes is on the homepage. And the confession, the deathbed confession or an eyewitness to it, that's on the homepage as well. And so you will see all this proof that we did not go to the moon, including, you don't have to buy the book, but it's in audio, Kindle, or print if you do. It has 17 interactive video links to prove everything that I say in the book, and you can see those free right now at Sibrel.com.
And before we go, sorry, Bart, but I need to ask you this because we didn't get it. We didn't get to this. The moon landing fraud, Cyrus Eugene, was it Akers? Cyrus Eugene Akers. I have that film up. Can you just tell me? I haven't watched this. What is it in like 2 seconds?
I have a time code. I could look where that time code is. If you want to cue it up, you can edit out this part or just give me a couple of seconds. I will find that time code here. Okay, so that's on my homepage of Sibrel.com. And let me find.
I've got this guy up right now.
Yeah.
So this guy is who that's talking?
I have a time code here. I'm trying to think where I put it. I thought I had it here.
I will, at the end of the video, I'll supply a picture of my
confession.
father.
This was the
his
son.
Badge.
Yeah. I'm going to give you a 4-minute range here. I thought I had it in this folder, but give me just a couple of minutes or edit this part out as I find the time code on here. If you cue it up, I'm trying to find that.
Plane hangers was pull framing with large canvas tents that was concealing the inside of the staging area. Inside the staging area, on flatbed trucks, was created the lunar lander that was reassembled back inside the hangars.
This guy kind of looks like is he like okay? He doesn't look.
No, he's
very
dying
healthy.
of cancer.
This is the guy who's dying of
so
cancer.
the clip here, the best clip to show, you can tack it on at the very end of our interview. It might be impactful. You would do 3:36, 3 minutes and 36 seconds, if you want to write that down, to 7 minutes and 28 seconds. It's about 4 minutes. 3:36. 3:36 through 7:28.
So this man is just real quick, who is he?
He's the son of Cyrus Eugene Akers, who murdered a coworker to keep this a secret. He was a kid, probably at elementary school. He lived right across from Cannon Air Force Base. And he tells the story of being there when his father confessed to him and to the military police that he killed somebody and that they did it to cover up the moon landing fraud. And he goes into great detail where they filmed it, how they filmed it, and the type of person his father was. There's an interesting remark you'll hear about how he hated lying. You would get in so much trouble for lying. My dad was that way too, and he was in the Air Force. And he said, look, I lived across from Cannon Air Force Base. My dad was chief of security at the Special Ops. And he even has the list that he gave me of the 15 people who were there to eyewitness it that President Johnson gave him. I published that in the book at Sibrel.com. So it's remarkable. When I uploaded this video, I know the moon landings are fake more than anybody. I thought, well, this is just one more piece of evidence. It blew people's mind. I had Mike Adams call me up frantic. Is this real? Is this real? Is this real? I said, yeah. I didn't realize the impact this video has on people. So go ahead and show it.
Yeah, so he's basically expressing the information his dad told him about having to murder a guy to cover this up. And
the moon landing fraud and how they filmed it, 2 airplane hangars and bringing in pulverized concrete and dump trucks for several weeks, painting the back of the hangars matte black. And there you go. This guy.
I guess if you've got nothing else to lose, if you're dying of cancer.
No, and here's another interesting part. If you want to go a full frame again, I'll tell another tragic event. Okay, so I'm writing this book. It took me 15 years to write the book. It took me 2 years to edit the book. Okay. So as I'm editing it, this is just a couple of years ago, I call up this guy who you just saw in the video. I'm going to just make sure I publish this correctly. This happened and this happened and this happened and this happened, right? He says, yep. I hang up. And I had some, you could say, good guy friends who work in, government who wanted me to call 2 people on that list. Okay, before I publish it in the book. And I'm like, what, do you want me to slit my own throat and tell them that I have them on the list at Cannon Air Force Base? They said, yeah, trust us. And I'm like, are you sure? They said, yeah, trust us. So I call these 2 people, one I had heard of, one I never heard of. And 2 days later, that guy who you saw, his house was broken into when he was out shopping. He has security cameras, password. They knew all the passwords. And all the stuff about his dad, all his computer files, documentation was taken. And a couple of days after that, this is like 2 years ago, 2 CIA agents show up at his house and threaten to kill him and his family if he ever talks to me again about his father's participation in the moon landing fraud. The White House press secretary was notified, the FBI was involved, and the United States Senate Intelligence Committee 2 years ago was involved in this investigation, and in particular, giving the man that you saw whistleblower protection. But they refused to release this to the public. It's still classified because it causes great embarrassment to the public. After the first NBC News director refused to broadcast it, he says, I'm not going to go down in history as someone who caused a civil war. 10 years later, a new NBC News director sees the same footage, agrees it absolutely proves the moon landings are fake, flies me to New York, puts me up in the Waldorf Astoria Hotel, gives me thousands of dollars for the exclusive license. They're going to break the story nationwide on NBC. A few days before the broadcast, they get a call from the federal government threatening them. They said it's going to embarrass the nation. Don't do it. And they back down. The truth needs to come out. And yeah, it'll be an embarrassment. So what? You know what I mean? You can't keep painting over mold. Mold can kill you. And if you don't cut off the gangrene, you'll die. So you have to face facts. If the next president, whoever they are, wants to get the public behind them, tell the truth about the moon landing fraud and say, see what they did? You see that? You see what I'm up against? It will enrage the public.
Do you think that the potential candidates know, or do you think they're in the dark too?
I would say if anyone's been president previously, they know. More than likely. President Clinton put in his book, his biography, on page 156 that he now believes the moon landings are fake.
He did say that?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Now,
I'm surprised that Elon Musk hasn't said anything.
He's hinted at it. He's hinted at it 2 ways. He says in order to go to the moon with people, we need to make 8 fuel trips first. They went in 1 rocket last time, and everything's more efficient in the future, you see. So we found von Braun documentation that says it's impossible to go in 1 rocket. We have a video at Sibrel.com of him saying so in a Disney film. You can't go to the moon in 1 rocket. You have to go up to a space station and then ferry up multiple fuel trips. All the fuel necessary in the biggest rocket will only get you into Earth orbit. And then you have to do multiple trips. So Elon Musk says to put men on the moon, you have to do a minimum of 8 fuel trips first. There's a new TED Talk that just came out. They said it might take 24 fuel trips to put men on the moon, but somehow you could do it with 1960s technology in 1 rocket. You see that? And then Elon Musk says about Apollo, it's a historical anomaly. Well, what does that mean? Historical anomaly means out of place technologically, because today they can only send people 1,000th the distance to the moon. So how could you have 1,000 times greater space traveling technology with 1 millionth the computing power of a cell phone? He needs NASA's cooperation to fulfill his dreams. He needs the federal government's cooperation to launch anything over 100 feet. So he's playing ball, but he hinted. He says we have to make 8 fuel trips first, and he said Apollo is a historical anomaly, you see? And then they destroyed all the original equipment. all the original electronic diagrams, all the original videotape, all the original telemetry data. You would never do that if you really went and spent $250 billion, but that's exactly what you would do if you perpetrated a fraud. So the fact that they destroyed everything is actually proof of the fraud.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, yeah, I keep a quite open mind. Let's just say that. In November, you went to an AI conference, right, where they showed the latest AI and they could basically see through imagery what was authentic and what was a deep fake, right?
Well, I didn't go there, but I have a video of it. Basically, all, products have their convention. You have automobile conventions, broadcasting equipment, like I go to TV cameras, and then they had an AI convention in November where the latest AI equipment was there that's not available to the public, but the VIPs who visited there got to play around with. One team had it write a novel, which took about a second. Another team had it write a symphony, took about a second. And the computer has this deep fake protocol that has never been wrong. You can feed it a picture of or a video of Biden or Trump. It'll tell you in 1 second whether it's real or a deep fake. So one team fed it pictures of the lunar surface from the unmanned Chinese probes. And it said these pictures are real. Then, in comparison, it fed them pictures from the Apollo program from the 60s and early 70s. And the smartest AI in the world just said every single Apollo picture is fake. Fake foreground, fake background, or whatever. Putin was there being shown this information, didn't look surprised at all. You see, one of the reasons they say their moon landings must be real is Russia or China would have outed us. Well, I have a friend who works in the Chinese Space Agency in the command center. He says everybody there knows the moon missions are fake, that they're blackmailing NASA for space technology in exchange for not blowing the whistle. Congress forbid the federal government to send space technology to China. They even kicked them out of the International Space Station. But the CIA is doing it anyway so that China will not expose the moon landing fraud. And people say, well, the moon landing involved hundreds of thousands of people. They couldn't keep a secret. Well, of course. They're not going to tell the guy making the glove or the boot or the door handle, hey, we really didn't go into the moon. Don't tell anybody. It's like you said earlier, a bank teller, what they know about the corruption in the bank and the CEO are completely different. I spoke to Eugene Krantz, the flight director at NASA. He says someone in the command center at Houston Control during the Apollo launch can tell no difference whatsoever between a simulation and an actual flight. So if they can't tell the difference, we're not going to be able to tell the difference decades after the fact, or if we're a 5-year-old watching it on TV from our living room.
Well, so let me ask you this, because is the AI, the photo was real? Like the photos were taken, they were real photos of a fake, if in theory the moon landing was fake, it was still a set. So it's a real photo.
It said it was in a TV studio instead of outside.
So it can tell the setting.
Correct. It can tell the geometric proportions down to the pixel, whether the foreground and the background are a legitimate outdoor landscape, like on the moon and the Chinese unmanned probes. You see, you can send a probe to the moon because you can X-ray a toaster 1,000 times, it'll still make toast. You can't X-ray a human 1,000 times, they'll die. That's why there's mannequins orbiting the moon in the latest NASA mission, because they would die from the radiation, you see.
So it was able to say, okay, this was not outdoors.
This is a real, yeah. It was shown the pictures from the Chinese probes, and it said, this is the real lunar surface. This is a real landscape. It was shown pictures from the Apollo program, and every single picture it said was taken inside a building in a TV studio because the foreground and the background are geometrically in disproportional size to one another.
Okay, that's really interesting. So, all right, so you're saying that the reason that Russia, in theory, from your insider information, is that the exchange of information that we're giving
they're blackmailing us. Yeah. China is blackmailing us and Russia's blackmailing us. I mean,
to get information about technology.
That's right. I mean, think about it. If I had a picture of a world leader with a prostitute, I could upload it to the internet and bring that person down. But then the picture is worth nothing. Now I can't make a penny off of it, right? The smarter thing, remember the Russian and the Chinese culture is centuries old. They're very smart chess players, right? And Go players, right? They decided a better use of the information is to blackmail the United States year after year, administration after administration. So the idea that hundreds of thousands of people involved proves it was real, wrong. The guy in the command center can't tell the difference between a simulation and actual flight, according to the flight director who I spoke to, right? And China and Russia are blackmailing the United States. That's why they don't blow the whistle on it. So that answers the two greatest criticisms as to why the missions must be real. Well, the atomic bomb involved 129,500 people, and only 8 people knew what they were building.
Right. And who is your source again? Who is this person that told you this?
Well, I had multiple sources. I had a person in management at NASA who wishes to remain anonymous who told me that the moon missions were fake. In about 1989, I had William Casey, who worked at NASA as an employee of Rocketdyne for 6 years, who read a classified memo from von Braun to the Pentagon saying it was impossible to go to the moon with 1960s technology. They only had a 1 in 10,000 chance of succeeding on the first attempt. So they faked it, right?
Well,
and then I had the source of Cyrus Eugene Akers,
right.
who was an eyewitness to them filming the fake moon landing at Cannon Air Force Base June 1st, 2nd, and 3rd of 1968, who also confessed to murdering a coworker to cover it up as he was dying and fearing the judgment of God, which is not something
who was
you
the one who
make up as you're
specifically
dying.
who was the one who specifically told you about possibly the agreement between Russia, China, and the blackmail?
Well, my friend who works at the Russian Space Agency, you can go to Sibrel.com and go down to my YouTube channel. His name is Rasa. He works at the Chinese Space Agency, and he did an interview with me. It's up there. And we did a podcast interview, and he admits, yeah, we all know here in the Chinese Space Agency that the moon missions are fake, and they're blackmailing NASA for space technology.
Why would he?
Well, because he's an American, I think, and so he can't be arrested, and he does something having to do with quantum mechanics, and they need his brain. And as far as I know, he hasn't gotten in trouble for saying that.
I'm going to watch that because that's...
Yeah, in fact, there's a clip recently that just came out of someone in a Chinese newscast saying, a scientist saying, many of us question the authenticity of the Apollo missions. So
many of us have started to wonder.
The Chinese government is allowing people to express their opinion, but officially the Chinese government is not going to blow the whistle. They've also never officially said the moon missions are real. You see, that's their way of having honor. They've never said that the moon missions are real, but they've agreed not to call them on it, not to prove that the moon missions are fake. They likely have photographs from their probes of the landing sites, and there's nothing there, you see.